head spun immediately. Make another baby, she spat bitterly, her voice dripping with contempt. Do you think it's that simple? Do you know what I've endured to give you a child? 9 painful miscarriages, failed IVFs, endless nights of prayers and tears. You and your family called me a witch, blamed me for our misfortunes, threw hurtful words at me, and now you talk about making another baby like it's a piece of cake. I'm done, Obinna. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. Obinna and Kemi's love story was like a wild river flowing against the strong current of family disapproval. Obinna came from a family so wealthy and powerful that their name was mentioned with respect in the corridors of power. His father was a prominent politician, a member of the Senate House of Representatives, whose voice carried weight across the nation. His mother was a business mogul, owning an empire of fabric stores in the bustling markets of Lagos, imported silks, vibrant Ankara, and dazzling lace. It was said that whatever fabric graced society's elite had passed through her hands. Together, Obinna's parents commanded not just wealth, but influence, and their world glittered with affluence. Kemi, on the other hand, was from a quiet, unassuming background. Her father, Pastor Adeyemo, was a man of deep faith and simple means. Though respected in his community, he wasn't the kind of man who sought material wealth. Instead, he served his congregation with humility, refusing to exploit his position for gain. Kemi's family wasn't poor, but in the shadow of Obinna's opulent upbringing, they might as well have been invisible. Their worlds collided at one of the country's most prestigious private universities, a playground for the rich children. For Obinna, being there was a given. It was normal for him to be there. But for Kemi, it was a miracle. A wealthy businessman whose failing company Pastor Adeyemo had prayed for had rebounded spectacularly. In gratitude, he vowed to sponsor one of the pastor's children through any level of education. Kemi, being the eldest and most promising, was chosen. And so she found herself among the elite, navigating a world of luxury, far removed from her modest roots. It was in this unlikely place that Obinna and Kemi first met. He was captivated by her quiet confidence, her intelligence, and her kindness. She, in turn, admired his charm and the way he treated everyone with genuine respect. Their love blossomed. But it was not without storms. Obinna's parents were appalled when he introduced Kemi to them. As far as they were concerned, she was an outsider, poor, from a different tribe, and completely unsuited to their world. His mother in particular was vocal about her disapproval. Obinna, how many times must I tell you to marry a nice Igbo girl? Leave these Yoruba people alone, she scolded, her voice sharp with frustration. Mother, love is not about tribe, race, or religion, Obinna would counter calmly. Oh, but it is, his mother snapped. That girl comes from nothing. Do you expect us to introduce her to your father's colleagues and our friends? How would that reflect on us? Okay, if peradventure we allow you to marry her, when introducing her, what do we introduce her as? Who is her father? "Introduce her as my wife," Obinna said firmly. "That's all that matters to me. If you and father can't see past your pride, then that's your problem, not mine." The battle raged for weeks and months. Kemi, heartbroken by the tension she caused, considered walking away. One evening, she confronted Obinna, her eyes glistening with tears. "I cannot do this anymore," she said. "Your family hates me, and I don't want you to have to choose between them and me. It's not fair to you." But Obinna would not let her go. "You are not a choice, Kemi. I love you and that's final. You are marrying me, not them." "That's not true," she argued. "When you marry someone, you marry their family too. And your family, they don't want me. How can we make this work?" Obinna took her hands in his gaze steady. "Listen to me. My family does not hate you. They are just worried about their reputation. Once we are married, the gossip will fade and they will move on. I know them better than anyone. I'm their only son. They can't stay angry forever." His words gave Kemi the strength to keep fighting. Against all odds and with their love as their anchor, Obinna and Kemi defied his family's wishes and tied the knot. Just as Obinna predicted, his parents eventually relented when they saw their son's unwavering determination. They had no choice but to embrace the woman he loved. And so Kemi became a part of the family she once thought was beyond her reach, proving that love, when true and steadfast, can conquer even the deepest divides. The first few years of Obinna and Kemi's marriage were blissful. They laughed often, shared dreams of a big family, and faced life hand in hand. Obinna, being the first child and only son, had always dreamed of having a big family, a house full of children. For him, it was not just about posterity. He genuinely loved children and envisioned a life surrounded by their laughter. He wanted plenty children, as much as was naturally possible. But 3 years passed, and their home was still silent. No cries of a baby, no tiny footsteps running around. It wasn't that Kemi could not conceive, nor was Obinna unable to father children. The problem was something far more heartbreaking. Every time Kemi became pregnant, she would lose the baby. Sometimes it happened after 5 months, sometimes 6. In 3 years, she endured 6 painful miscarriages. Her body and her spirit were weary. Then, as if fate had more trials in store, Kemi stopped conceiving naturally. The couple turned to IVF, hoping science could succeed where nature hadn't. But even then, the babies did not stay. 3 failed attempts later, they gave up defeated. Kemi cried often, fasting and praying with the relentless support of her parents, who believed the issue might be spiritual. Yet, nothing changed. They sought medical help too. But every doctor gave the same reply: "There is nothing wrong with you." The problem remained, and with each loss, Kemi sank deeper into sadness and frustration. Obinna's family made things worse. During one visit, Kemi overheard her mother-in-law whispering to her son, "I warned you, but you wouldn't listen. These Yoruba women are witches. I deal with them every day. Do you see now? I gave birth to you and your sister without trouble. So why is it so hard for her to have children? If not that she and her coven are feasting on my grandchildren. Kemi's chest tightened with pain. Her tears flowed, not just because of the cruel words, but because Obinna said nothing to defend her. He just sat there in silence. For the first time in her marriage, she felt truly alone. Obinna's only sister Cheta was even worse. She never missed an opportunity to mock Kemi. Over time, Obinna, once her rock, began to drift. He grew frustrated and distant. All his friends had children with ease, yet he, despite his wealth and all the money he had spent, could not even have one. His love for Kemi became overshadowed by his pain and anger. The cracks in their relationship deepened. Obinna started lashing out, hurling cruel words at Kemi whenever he felt provoked. One day, during a heated argument, he yelled the words that shattered her heart. "You witch! You sacrificed my children in your coven, and then you now pretend to be sad. Don't think I don't see through you. Wipe those crocodile tears." Kemi's breath caught in her throat. She felt like the ground had opened beneath her. That night, she packed a bag and ran to her mother, seeking advice. She poured out her pain, hoping for comfort. "I'm not sure I can stay in that marriage anymore. I don't even know who my husband is," she cried, but her mother's words stung instead. "Ha!" she exclaimed. "Don't say that again, Kemi. A woman's place is with her husband. What will people say? What will the church say? Your father's members? You want to disgrace your father and I? Or don't you know that divorce is a sin before God? Marriage is about patience and endurance. Keep praying for your husband. You should be lucky that he doesn't even beat you at least." Disheartened, Kemi returned home, feeling worse than before. No one seemed to understand her pain. Even her best friend, Grace, dismissed her struggles. "Why are you complaining, Kemi? Look at your life. You live in luxury. You drive expensive cars, wear designers' clothes. Omo, if I had even half of what you have, I would endure anything. You are living the dream." At that point, Kemi realized that her battle was hers alone. It was totally pointless trying to make people understand how she felt. No one could truly understand the depth of her sorrow. Obinna's hostility towards Kemi grew sharper with each passing day, cutting through the fragile threads of their marriage. The warmth that had once bound them had turned into an icy chasm of bitterness. Kemi, desperate to mend their broken bond, made a decision she would regret forever. She decided to confront him, not with anger, but with love and vulnerability. That evening, she poured her heart out into preparing his favorite meal, setting the table with care. When Obinna returned from work, weary and irritable as usual, she greeted him and served the food by herself. She waited until he had eaten, freshened up, and was preparing for bed. And then she summoned the courage, approached him cautiously. "Obim," she began, her voice gentle, almost trembling. "I need to talk to you." Obinna glanced at her, his expression hard. "What is it now, Kemi? I've had a long day," he replied impatiently. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she pressed on. "I just want to know, How did we get here? How did we go from loving each other so deeply to this? Her voice cracked. Obim, what did I do to make you hate me so much? He let out a cold, bitter laugh. What haven't you done, Kemi? He said, his tone sharp as a knife. I have given you everything. Everything. I've taken care of you and your wretched family. And what have you done for me in return? Nothing. Just one thing I asked of you. You failed. Kemi flinched as he leaned closer, his eyes hard and unyielding. What is so hard about giving me a child, Kemi? A child, something every woman does with ease. But you can't even manage that. Instead, you sit here all day, spending my money like it grows on trees. Her heart broke under the weight of his words. I could get a job, Obim, she whispered, her voice shaking. But you told me not to. I don't want you working, Kemi. I want you pregnant. I want a child. Is that too much to ask? He snapped, his anger rising. The dam of her emotions burst. Do you think this is easy for me? She cried, her voice trembling with pain. I have endured so much, more than you will ever understand. This is not just hard for you, it is breaking me too. But her plea only fueled his rage. Spare me your crocodile tears, he said coldly. They mean nothing to me anymore. That night, Kemi lay awake, the silence of their room suffocating her. She cried until her tears ran dry, her heart heavy with despair. In that moment, she made a solemn vow. She would carry her pain in silence and wait for the Almighty God to intervene. Until then, she would endure, even if it tore her apart. Not long after that fateful night, something happened that changed Kemi's life. Her prayers, whispered through endless nights of tears and heartache, were finally answered. But whether it was a gift from the heavens or a cruel twist of fate was a question only you, my dear viewers, can decide. Kemi woke up one morning feeling different. Her body was changing. There was a strange warmth in her heart. She clutched her belly and whispered, My miracle has come. You will stay no matter what anyone says. She had not conceived naturally in over 2 years, and now this pregnancy felt like an answer from the heavens. But when she shared the news with Obinna, her joy was crushed. He stood before her, his face hard, his laughter cold. You, he sneered, you're celebrating a pregnancy. How many times have you destroyed my hopes, Kemi? Don't get too comfortable, oh. It's only a matter of time before you feel again as usual. Kemi's heart shattered into countless pieces. She stared at him, wondering where the man she had once loved so deeply had gone. The man standing before her was a stranger. Obinna, deep down, wrestled with conflicting emotions. A small flicker of hope danced in his heart, but he quickly extinguished it. He couldn't bear to be disappointed again. His mother's words haunted him, urging him to divorce Kemi and marry another woman. It seemed like the simplest solution, the logical thing to do. Yet, every time he considered it, he saw Kemi's face in his mind, and something inside him resisted. Despite his growing bitterness, he could not imagine life without her. As her pregnancy progressed, she started experiencing some symptoms she had never faced before. Her mornings were plagued with nausea, and she carried a small bottle to catch the saliva that seemed to pour endlessly from her mouth. Her energy levels plummeted, leaving her bedridden most days. Instead of offering support, Obinna used her struggles as ammunition. "You are so lazy," he scoffed one day when she stayed in bed, too weak to move. "You smell awful with all that spitting," he added another time. And when she indulged in her cravings, he called her a glutton. Kemi's nights were filled with silent tears. She endured Obinna's cruelty, clinging to the hope that this time would be different. Every prayer she uttered was for the safety of her child. Months rolled by. 5 months came and went. 6 months passed without incident. By the time she reached the 7th month, Kemi began to hope. And by the 8th month, she was smiling again, her heart filled with joy. For Obinna, something shifted when he realized the pregnancy was holding. The baby seemed to be staying, defying all odds. His attitude softened. He started buying small gifts for his wife, her favorite snacks, a bouquet of flower, even a soft shawl to keep her warm on chilly nights. "Obim," he said one evening, placing his hand on her swollen belly, "I think our baby will be a boy, a strong boy." But Kemi did not respond. She had grown used to his unpredictable moods, and though he was being kind now, the wounds of his previous words had not healed. Resentment was beginning to take root, but she buried it deep inside. This was not the time to dwell on bitterness or anger. All she cared about was the life growing inside her. And so the days crept closer to her due date. Kemi braced herself for what lay ahead. Little did she know that the truest test of her strength and love was yet to come. The moment they had all been waiting for finally arrived. Kemi's labor began in the early hours of the morning, and she was rushed to the hospital. The labor was intense and unrelenting, lasting for hours. Each passing moment brought more pain, and yet Kemi held on, her strength fueled by the hope of meeting her child. The nurses moved swiftly, monitoring both mother and baby. But as the 12th hour struck, the baby's heartbeat grew faint. Alarmed, the doctor called Obinna aside. "Mr. Ikago," the doctor said gravely, "your wife's labor is not progressing as it should, and the baby is becoming weak. We need to perform a cesarean section immediately. Every minute counts." Obinna felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. The weight of the decision pressed down on him as he left the doctor's office. When he returned to the labor room, Kemi saw the worry etched on his face. "Obim," she asked breathlessly, her face pale and drenched in sweat, "what's wrong?" "The doctor said they need to perform a cesarean section," he replied hesitantly. Kemi did not hesitate. "Then let them do it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'll do anything to save this baby. Tell them I'm ready, please." Before Obinna could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was his mother. "How is she doing?" the woman asked, her voice sharp and urgent. Obinna explained the situation to her. "No, shut up," she snapped, cutting him off. "I warned you about this girl. So lazy. Now she can't even push like every other woman. She wants an easy way out. In our family, we don't do this nonsense. I pushed you out myself, and so did my mother, her mother, and every woman in our lineage. Tell that girl to stop pretending and push that baby out." Obinna felt torn. His mother's words echoed in his mind, adding to his confusion. He paced outside the labor room, wrestling with his thoughts as Kemi's cries of pain grew louder. Hours passed, and the doctor approached him again, his tone firmer this time. "Mr. Ikago, I understand this is probably a difficult decision for you to make, but you need to act now. Both your wife and your baby are at serious risk. A cesarean section is not a failure, it's a medical necessity. If something happens to them, it will be on you." The gravity of the doctor's words snapped Obinna out of his daze. The thought of losing both his wife and their baby was unbearable. He picked up the pen with trembling hands and signed the consent form. Within minutes, Kemi was prepped and wheeled into the operating room. Obinna waited outside, his heart pounding with fear. He ignored his phone as his mother's calls came in repeatedly. At that moment, nothing else mattered but his wife and child. After what felt like an eternity, a nurse emerged from the theater. "The baby is out," she said. "But..." She shook her head. "But what?" Obinna demanded, his voice shaking. "The baby is unresponsive. The team is doing everything they can." Obinna slumped against the wall, his world spinning. The miracle they had prayed for now hung by a thread. He closed his eyes and whispered a desperate prayer to God. "Please save my child. Don't let it end this way." Inside the theater, Kemi lay unconscious. The quiet hum of the machines and the urgent voices of the medical team fighting to revive the baby filled the room. The room held its breath as time stood still. The doctor, assisted by the nurses and midwives, worked tirelessly to revive the baby, but their efforts yielded no positive response. The room was heavy with tension. The baby remained limp, unresponsive to stimuli, and struggled to breathe on his own. A small oxygen mask was placed over his tiny face, but even that offered little improvement. After what felt like ages, the doctor approached Obinna, who was slumped on a chair outside the operating room, his head buried in his hands. The doctor's expression was somber as he sat beside him. "Mr. Ikago," the doctor began gently, "I need to speak with you about your son's condition." Obinna looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "What's wrong, doctor? Please tell me there's hope." The doctor sighed deeply. "The labor lasted far too long. As a result, your baby suffered oxygen deprivation, which has caused severe brain damage. He is showing all signs of a critical condition, cerebral palsy. His brain is unable to send signals to his body, and his lungs are not functioning independently." Obinna felt as though the air had been knocked out of him. "Cerebral palsy," he whispered, the words foreign and terrifying. "Yes," the doctor confirmed. "It's a severe case. Even if by any miracle he survives, He will not have a normal life. I must be honest with you. His chances of survival are very slim. Tears welled up in Obinna's eyes as he grabbed the doctor's arm. There must be something we can do, doctor. Any treatment, any surgery. Money is not an issue. Please, save my child. The doctor shook his head sadly. I'm sorry, Mr. Ikago. There is no remedy for this. This is why we advised against prolonging the labor earlier. At this point, the kindest option would be to let him go. Keeping him alive artificially will only prolong his suffering. Obinna was devastated. The joy of finally becoming a father after years of waiting was now overshadowed by a crushing weight of guilt. He blamed himself for not acting sooner, for hesitating when it mattered the most. The doctor's words echoed in his mind, but a new fear gripped him. How would he break this to Kemi? When Kemi regained consciousness, her first words were a desperate plea. Where's my baby? Let me see my baby. Obinna knelt beside her, his face streaked with tears. Kemi, listen to me, he began, his voice trembling. The baby, he's very sick. The doctors says he won't survive. No, Kemi cried, clutching his shirt. I don't care what the doctor says. I want my baby Obinna. I carried him for 9 months. I won't let him go. Obinna tried to reason with her, his voice breaking with each word. Kemi, his brain is damaged. He can't breathe on his own. Do you want to see our child suffer every day, knowing there's nothing we can do to help him? But Kemi was unyielding. Her voice was resolute. A bird in hand is better than 1,000 in the bush. Do you know the pain I've endured to bring him into this world? I will take my baby however he is, no matter what. Obinna was trapped between the love for his wife and the harsh reality before them. In his turmoil, he decided to seek guidance from his father, Senator Ikago. But reaching him was impossible. Left with no other option, he summoned his courage and made the decision himself. As the doctor turned off the machines, keeping their baby alive, Obinna broke down completely, tears pouring down his face. This is my fault, he sobbed. I should have listened. I should have acted sooner. The doctor placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Don't be too hard on yourself. This is one of the hardest decisions any parent can make. You did what was best for your child. Before the doctor could leave, he hesitated, a thoughtful look crossing his face. Mr. Ikago, I need to speak with you in my office. There's something important we need to discuss. Obinna followed him numbly, his heart heavy. As they stepped into the hallway, his mother, Teresa, came running toward them. Obinna, what happened? I've been calling you, she exclaimed, her voice rising. Obinna's bloodshot eyes met hers and she froze. I said it, Teresa hissed, her voice full of venom. That witch you call a wife. Mother! Obinna cut her off sharply. Please, not now. Go home. Teresa opened her mouth to argue, but the icy finality in her son's voice silenced her. With a huff, she turned and left. Inside the doctor's office, the doctor looked at Obinna with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Forgive me for prying, but what just happened back there?" Obinna shook his head. "It's a long story, doctor. Let's focus on what you wanted to discuss." The doctor nodded and opened Kemi's file. "Mr. Ikagu, we've been conducting tests to determine and understand the cause of your wife's repeated miscarriages. We found nothing conclusive. But then something occurred to me now. May I ask, what's your blood group?" "I'm O positive," Obinna replied. The doctor sighed and shook his head. "What is it, doctor?" Obinna replied. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ikago. We've been looking in the wrong places. Your wife is RH negative. This means there's an incompatibility between your blood types. When a RH positive fetus enters the bloodstream of a RH negative mother, her body sees it as a threat and creates antibodies to destroy it. This can lead to miscarriages or severe health issues for the baby." Obinna's eyes widened in disbelief. "I don't understand. What is this RH thing?" The doctor smiled. "RH, okay, let me break it down. You are A positive. That means there is a plus sign on your blood group. Your wife has a negative sign. That is, she has a minus, meaning you are positive and she is negative." "Are you saying this isn't spiritual, doctor?" The doctor chuckled softly. "Not at all. It's purely medical. Unfortunately, this should have been identified and managed earlier, before you even get married." "Can it be fixed?" Obinna asked, his voice filled with a glimmer of hope. "Yes," the doctor assured him. "There are medications that can be administered before or during pregnancy to prevent the body from creating these antibodies." Obinna left the office with renewed hope, but a heavy heart. Years of bitterness, blame, and suffering had been built on a mere misunderstanding. He realized how much pain he had caused Kemi and vowed to make amends. When Kemi opened her eyes and realized her baby was gone, a piercing cry erupted from her lips. Her voice was raw with pain and her body trembled with fury. "You killed my baby, Obinna. What have I ever done to you?" she wailed, her voice echoing through the room. Obinna stood frozen, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the guilt and sorrow. His eyes, bloodshot from relentless tears, locked onto hers, but he could not meet her gaze for long. "He was not normal, Kemi," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't bear to see him suffer, to watch him live a life of pain. I did what had to be done for us." Kemi's head snapped towards him, her eyes blazing with a mixture of grief and rage. "For us?" she hissed. "When was the last time you did anything for us? You let me down, Obinna. If you had been there, if you had allowed the doctors to do the right thing, this would never have happened." Her words cutting through the air, each syllable landing like a blow. Obinna's heart shattered at her accusations. He opened his mouth to defend himself, to explain his impossible choice, but the words died on his lips. He stepped closer, desperate to comfort her, to hold her trembling hands, But Kemi recoiled as though his touch would burn her. "Don't touch me," she said coldly. "For everything you've ever done to me, for all the mean, vile things you have said to me, the neglect, the way you made me feel worthless, I forgive you. I forgave it all because I believed in you, in us. But this..." She paused, her voice breaking as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "This I will never forgive." Her words hit him harder than any slap ever could. They lingered in the air like an unbearable weight. He wanted to plead, to beg her to understand, but he knew it would make no difference. He watched her face a mask of anguish, and felt the force of her pain. It was a mirror of his own, magnified 1,000 times. The coldness in her voice, the finality of her tone, it only told him what he feared the most. Kemi had built a wall around her heart, and Obinna wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to break through. Something irreparable had broken between them, and he feared things would never return to the way they were, at least not anytime soon. When Kemi was discharged a few days later, Obinna brought her home in silence. She had not spoken a single word to him or anyone else since their argument in the hospital. Her silence was deafening, a wall no one dared to breach. The air in the house grew heavy with grief, and everyone, including Obinna, knew to leave her alone. She needed time to mourn, to grieve the unimaginable loss of her baby. A week passed, and the silence remained unbroken. Kemi had not still said a word, not even to her mother, who had come to stay with her as custom dictated. Her mother tried her best, cooking her favorite meals, sitting with her in quiet solidarity, and offering gentle words of comfort. But Kemi was unreachable, retreating further into a shell of despair with each passing day. To Kemi, the world felt like it had crumbled beneath her feet. Her baby had been her miracle, her hope after enduring years of heartbreak and countless losses. And now he was gone, snatched away. She believed by an act of negligence and cruelty. The physical pain from her surgery was excruciating, but it paled in comparison to the agony she felt in her heart. Talking to anyone felt pointless. No one could possibly understand the depths of her sorrow. Obinna tried desperately to reach her, to bridge the growing chasm between them, but every attempt only seemed to push her further away. The walls she built around herself were impenetrable, growing thicker with each passing day. Even his family, who initially tried to console her, quickly withdrew, recognizing the storm raging within her. Kemi was no longer the same woman they knew. Grief had transformed her into someone they barely recognized. The house became a tomb of silence. Days turned into weeks, and the coldness between Kemi and Obinna grew unbearable. Kemi spent her days in the nursery, a room that should have been filled with the laughter and cries of their baby, but was now a haunting reminder of what they had lost. She would sit there for hours, staring at the crib, or clutching the tiny little clothes she had lovingly prepared. Her tears were endless, her pain palpable. For Obinna, the grief was equally suffocating. He could barely function at work, haunted by the image of his baby lying helpless in the hospital, machines beeping around his fragile body. The weight of regret was crushing. He wished he could turn back time to make different choices to save his son and his marriage. But it was too late. He had failed as a father and failed even more as a husband. One day, unable to bear the silence any longer, Obinna left work early, determined to speak to Kemi. He decided that no matter how painful it might be, they needed to confront their grief together. When he reached home, the house was as quiet as ever. He knew where to find her. She would be in the nursery, as usual. When he entered the room, he found her sitting by the crib, her back to him. The air was thick with tension, but he closed the door softly behind him and stepped inside. "Kemi," he began gently. "I know you can hear me. We need to talk." She did not respond, but he continued anyway. "I'm so sorry we lost our baby." Her head wiped around and her eyes blazed with fury. "We did not lose our baby, Obinna. You killed our baby." Her voice was icy, laced with venom. Obinna's shoulders slumped, and tears filled his eyes. "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "It was my fault. I regret the decisions I made that day more than you can ever imagine. I should have let the doctors act sooner. I was foolish, and now I've lost everything." He wiped at the tears streaming down his face. "I can't take away your pain, Kemi. I feel it too. Watching them turn off those machines broke me. I relive that moment every single day." Kemi's face softened for a moment, but her anguish remained. "If it hurt you so much, then why did you let it happen?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I did not have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," she shot back, her anger flaring once more. Obinna shook his head. "Kemi, I was the one who saw him. Our son was not responding. He could not even breathe on his own. His brain wasn't functioning. What kind of life would he have had? I could not stand to watch him suffer like that." Kemi broke down, her sobs shaking her entire body. Obinna hesitated, unsure if she would accept his comfort. And so he said the first thing that came to his mind. "We can make another baby. The doctor found a solution." He soon realized too late that he had said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Her head spun immediately. "Make another baby," she spat bitterly, her voice dripping with contempt. "Do you think it's that simple? Do you know what I've endured to give you a child? 9 painful miscarriages, failed IVFs, endless nights of prayers and tears. You and your family called me a witch, blamed me for our misfortunes, threw hurtful words at me, and now you talk about making another baby like it's a piece of cake." She shook her head, her expression one of heartbreak and resolve. "I'm done, Obinna. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce." Obinna's heart stopped. "No, Kemi, it hasn't come to that. Please don't say that," he begged. his voice breaking. But Kemi had already made up her mind. She stood and walked to the door, her face a mask of determination. "Expect to hear from my lawyer," she said coldly before unlocking the door and leaving the room. Obinna sank to the floor, his world crumbling around him. The woman he loved, the family they had dreamed of, the life they had built, it was all slipping through his fingers, and he was powerless to stop it. The next morning, before the sun could fully rise, Kemi packed her bags and left the home she had shared with Obinna. Her heart felt as heavy as a suitcase in her hand. She moved in with her best friend, Grace, who welcomed her with open arms and no questions asked. Kemi settled into Grace's spare room, but despite the change of scenery, her mind remained trapped in the past. Days turned into weeks, yet Kemi found herself unable to take the next step, filing for the divorce. Every time she thought about making a move, memories of her life with her husband flooded her mind. She recalled the laughter they once shared, the way he would surprise her with little gestures of love, and the promises they made to each other. She could still see the pain in his eyes as she walked out of their home that morning, the unspoken words that lingered between them. It was clear she still loved him, but the betrayal she felt made forgiveness seem impossible. Grace watched her friend with a knowing look, noticing how Kemi's face would soften whenever her phone lit up with yet another call or message from Obinna. He was relentless, texting apologies, pouring out his heart and begging her to come back. Grace finally decided to intervene. One evening, as they sat on the couch in the quiet of Grace's simple apartment, she placed a hand on Kemi's shoulder. "Kemi," she began gently, "you are carrying so much pain and it's eating you up inside. You need to let it go. I see the way you light up when you talk about him, even when you are upset. And it's obvious Obinna still loves you, or he wouldn't be calling you every hour. You need to ask yourself if this is really what you want. Do you want to hold on to the hurt, or do you want to find a way back to the love you both shared?" Kemi's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. She wasn't ready to admit Grace was right, at least not yet. Meanwhile, Obinna was falling apart. The house felt empty without Kemi's presence, and the silence was unbearable. He could not focus on work. Food lost its taste, and sleep evaded him. Each day without her felt like a lifetime. His mother, who had been quietly observing his misery, began to understand just how deeply he loved his wife. She also recognized the role she had played in driving a wedge between them. The guilt was overwhelming, and for the first time, she decided to take responsibility for her actions. One afternoon, Obinna's mother did something no one could have ever imagined. She sought out Kemi. After making a few discreet inquiries, she found herself standing outside Grace's apartment. She hesitated briefly before knocking on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. When Kemi opened the door, she saw her mother-in-law standing there. She froze in shock. This was the same woman who had treated her with disdain, who had made her feel unworthy for so long. She welcomed her into the apartment, and when they sat together, the woman looked at Kemi, her eyes filling with tears. Kemi, the older woman, began, her voice trembling. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I had to come. I've done you so much wrong and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm here to ask for it anyway. She took a deep breath. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. You were nothing but good to my son, and I let my pride and ignorance blind me. I see now how much you mean to him. Please, Kemi, don't punish Obinna for my mistakes. He loves you, and I know you love him too. He has been miserable without you. Please, come home, my daughter. Let's start over. Kemi was stunned. This was a woman who never apologized to anyone. Seeing her humble herself so deeply was like watching the impossible unfold. For a moment, she could not speak. Then, as if something inside her broke, she began to cry. The tears came in waves, carrying with them the pain, anger and bitterness she had been holding on to for so long. I forgive you, Kemi said through her tears, her voice shaky but sincere. But this is not just about you. Obinna hurt me too. I know, her mother-in-law replied softly, and I believe he'll spend the rest of his life making it right if you give him the chance. Kemi nodded slowly, the weight of her decision settling over her. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth fighting for. I'll come home, she whispered, her voice steadying. The older woman reached out and pulled Kemi into a warm embrace. For the first time in years, Kemi felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of healing, she thought to herself. Kemi returned home the evening after her mother-in-law's visit, her heart heavy, yet filled with a glimmer of hope. As she stepped into the living room, she was taken aback by the sight of Obinna. He was a shadow of his former self, his once pristine appearance replaced by disheveled clothes, unkempt hair, and the faint smell of alcohol lingering in the air. It was clear he had not had a bath in days, let alone cared for himself. The moment he looked up and saw her standing there, it was as if life returned to his soul. His eyes lit up with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming relief. Kemi, he whispered, almost as if afraid she would disappear if he spoke too loudly. Before she could say a word, he rushed forward, wrapping her in his arms tightly. Kemi did not resist. Instead, she melted into his embrace, and together they let their emotions flow freely. Their tears fell, tears of pain, loss, regrets, and an unspoken promise to start afresh. After what felt like an eternity, Kemi broke the silence, her voice soft yet steady. You said the doctor had found a solution. Obinna pulled back slightly, his hands still holding hers, as he searched her face. His tear-filled eyes widened in surprise. Does this mean what I think it means? Are you back for good? His voice trembled with hope. Kemi's lips curved into a smile, the kind that had once captivated him in their early days of love. It was her most beautiful smile. one that spoke volumes without words. Taking her response as the answer he had prayed for, Obinna wasted no time. He led her to the couch and began to explain everything the doctor had told him months ago. He spoke about the advancements in medical care, a treatment that could help them have a healthy child in the future. He shared how the doctor had assured him that their dreams of parenthood were still possible. As Kemi listened, her heart filled with something she had not felt in a long time. She saw a path forward, a chance for happiness, a reason to heal. She reached out and held Obinna's face in her hands, her eyes brimming with tears. We've been through so much, but maybe this is our second chance. Obinna nodded, his voice firm despite his emotion. Thank you, Obim, for giving us another chance. I don't know what changed your mind. Your mother did, she said, cutting him short with a smile. His brows furrowed. My mother? How? She came by Grace's place and begged me to forgive her and come home. Seeing her beg made me realize that anything was possible if you tried hard enough. Obinna held her hands, now even more determined than before. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, to rebuild what we lost. I love you, Kemi, and I'll never take you or our future for granted again. With those words, they both knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to walk it together, this time as a team. And so, Kemi and Obinna's love story once again came back to life. The lessons they had learned from their pain, guiding them to build something even stronger than what they had before. As the years rolled by, with the help of the new medications suggested by the doctor, they had beautiful, healthy babies, just as they had always wanted, and they got to live together happily ever after. Hey lovers, thank you for listening to this story. If you are new here, welcome to our community. I hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you have not done so already, please hit the subscribe button, and to support the growth of our community, give this video a big thumbs up. If you know someone who would enjoy a story like this, or someone who needs to hear this story, do not hesitate to share. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Remember, like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe. I'll take my leave now, but I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.